The myth of Sisyphus is one of the most well-known myths in Greek mythology, due to Sisyphus's cunning and the punishment that awaited him. If you could cheat death, would you? Most people would. But few have ever had the cunning of Sisyphus, the legendary rogue who cheated death not just once, but twice. Sisyphus ultimately paid a heavy price for his trickery. The reprieve he gained through his cunning was brief. The torture he suffered in the underworld was eternal. In Greek mythology, Sisyphus or Sisyphos was the founder and king of Ephra, now known as Corinth. He reveals Zeus's abduction of Aegina to the river god Sisyphus, thereby incurring Zeus's wrath. His subsequent cheating of death earns him eternal punishment in the underworld, once he dies of old age. The gods forced him to roll an immense boulder up a hill only for it to roll back down every time it neared the top, repeating this action for eternity. Through the classical influence on contemporary culture, tasks that are both laborious and futile are therefore described as Sisyphean. Sisyphus was formerly a Thessalian prince as the son of King Aeolus of Aeolia and Enerete, daughter of Dimachus. He was the brother of Athamas, Salmoneus, Cretheus, Perieres, Dioneus, Magnus, Calus, Conachi, Alcyone, Posidus and Paramede. Sisyphus married the Pleiad Merope, by whom he became the father of Ornitian, Porphyrion, Glaucus, Thersander and Almus. He was the grandfather of Bellerophon through Glaucus, and of Minyas, founder of Orchomenus, through Almus. Another account related that Minyas was Sisyphus's son instead. In other versions of the myth, Sisyphus was the true father of Odysseus by Anticlea instead of Laertes. Sisyphus and his brother Salmoneus were known to hate each other, and Sisyphus consulted the oracle of Delphi on just how to kill Salmoneus without incurring any severe consequences for himself. From Homer onward, Sisyphus was famed as the craftiest of men. He seduced Salmoneus's daughter Tyro in one of his plots to kill Salmoneus, only for Tyro to slay their children when she discovered that Sisyphus was planning on using them to eventually dethrone her father. Sisyphus betrayed one of Zeus's secrets by revealing the whereabouts of the Aesopid Aegina to her father, the river god Sisyphus, in return for causing a spring to flow on the Corinthian Acropolis. Zeus ordered Thanatos to chain Sisyphus in Tartarus. Sisyphus was curious as to why Charon, whose job it was to guide souls to the underworld, had not appeared on this occasion. Sisyphus slyly asked Thanatos to demonstrate how the chains worked. As Thanatos was granting him his wish, Sisyphus seized the opportunity and trapped Thanatos in the chains instead. Once Thanatos was bound by the strong chains, no one died on earth, causing an uproar. Ares, the god of war, became annoyed that his battles had lost their fun because his opponents would not die. The exasperated Ares intervened, freeing Thanatos, enabling deaths to happen again, and turned Sisyphus over to him. In some versions, Hades was sent to chain Sisyphus and was chained himself. As long as Hades was trapped, nobody could die. Consequently, sacrifices could not be made to the gods, and those that were old and sick were suffering. The gods finally threatened to make life so miserable for Sisyphus that he would wish he were dead. He then had no choice but to release Hades. Before Sisyphus died, he had told his wife to throw his naked corpse into the middle of the public square, purportedly as a test of his wife's love for him. This caused Sisyphus to end up on the shores of the river Styx when he was brought to the underworld. Complaining to Persephone that this was a sign of his wife's disrespect for him, Sisyphus persuaded her to allow him to return to the upper world. Once back in Ephra, the spirit of Sisyphus scolded his wife for not burying his body and giving it a proper funeral as a loving wife should. When Sisyphus refused to return to the underworld, he was forcibly dragged back there by Hermes. In another version of the myth, Persephone was tricked by Sisyphus that he had been conducted to Tartarus by mistake, and so she ordered that he be released. In Philoctetes by Sophocles, there is a reference to the father of Odysseus, rumored to have been Sisyphus, and not Laertes, whom we know as the father in the Odyssey, upon having returned from the dead. Clarification needed. Euripides, in Cyclops, also identified Sisyphus as Odysseus's father. As a punishment for his crimes, Hades made Sisyphus roll a huge boulder endlessly up a steep hill in Tartarus. The maddening nature of the punishment was reserved for Sisyphus due to his hubristic belief that his cleverness surpassed that of Zeus himself. Hades accordingly displayed his own cleverness by enchanting the boulder into rolling away from Sisyphus before he reached the top, which ended up consigning Sisyphus to an eternity of useless efforts and unending frustration. Thus, pointless or interminable activities are sometimes described as Sisyphean. Sisyphus was a common subject for ancient writers and was depicted by the painter Polygnotus on the walls of the Leschi at Delphi. According to the solar theory, King Sisyphus is the disk of the sun that rises every day in the east and then sinks into the west. Other scholars regard him as a personification of waves rising and falling, or of the treacherous sea. The 1st century BC Epicurean philosopher Lucretius interprets the myth of Sisyphus as personifying politicians aspiring for political office who are constantly defeated, with the quest for power, in itself an empty thing, being likened to rolling the boulder up the hill. Friedrich Welcker suggested that he symbolizes the vain struggle of man in the pursuit of knowledge, and Solomon Reinach that his punishment is based on a picture in which Sisyphus was represented rolling a huge stone acrocorinthus, symbolic of the labor and skill involved in the building of the Sisypheum. Albert Camus, in his 1942 essay The Myth of Sisyphus, saw Sisyphus as personifying the absurdity of human life. But Camus concludes, one must imagine Sisyphus happy, as the struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. In his 1994 The Body of Myth, J. Nigro Sansones, 26, building on the work of Georges Dumézil, speculates that the origin of the name, Sisyphus, is onomatopoetic of the continual back and forth, susurrant sound, sis-fus, made by the breath in the nasal passages, situating the mythology of Sisyphus in a far larger context of archaic, see Proto-Indo-European religion, trance-inducing techniques related to breath control. The repetitive inhalation-exhalation cycle is described esoterically in the myth as an up-down motion of Sisyphus and his boulder on a hill. In experiments that test how workers respond when the meaning of their task is diminished, the test condition is referred to as the Sisyphusian condition. The two main conclusions of the experiment are that people work harder when their work seems more meaningful, and that people underestimate the relationship between meaning and motivation.